Hello, you're listening to Digital Disruptors, a PMW mini-series featuring winners from this year's 30 Under 30 Performance Marketing Awards and addressing the gap between this generation and ones that have been in the industry years and years before them. In this episode, I'm joined by Megan Tarsuslugil, Senior PR Campaigns Manager at Journey Further, although now she's Senior PR Manager at Bottled Imagination, and Frediano Iannelli, Strategy Director at PMG. We spoke about the difference between short form versus long form, the importance of data for driving creative strategies, and whether performance and brand fit in the same space at all. This was supposed to be a discussion, but unfortunately Fred did end up getting a bit lost on the way, so I've had to film this as a two-parter, but they both managed to join us for the end game, so make sure you stay tuned. Megan, thank you for joining me.
My pleasure. It's lovely to be here.
Lovely to have you. Okay, so today we're talking about optimizing creativity and also how that's changed over the years. Now, one of the big things that have changed is AI kind of taken over everything. And we were talking a bit about AI before. So can you tell me a bit about how AI has influenced your day-to-day and in what ways you use it in your work?
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the big things that I noticed in PR specifically is having AI help you to generate proof of concept. So that's something that's been, I guess, like a big driving force in then helping to get buy-in from clients at that earlier stage. So whereas before you might use maybe external examples, like things that you've seen other brands do, now with tools like Midjourney, even with like Adobe's integrated AI software that they have, you're able to generate, I guess, like an idea to show the client like what that might look like so quickly to then get them to sign that off because they can kind of visualize what it looks like. I think obviously storytelling, it's words, but it's also visuals too. So it's how you can kind of, I guess, help them to get that broader understanding of this is what we're envisioning and like this is how it could look in a really, really like quick way without having to put too much time and budget in at that start stage, whereas then you can put that time and budget in later when you're actually bringing the idea itself to life.
Can you take me back to when you first started using AI in your workplace?
My first use of it was Midjourney. So I first started playing around with it to kind of show, I guess, kind of what I was talking about before, like what I would want something to look like in real time. So that was the first ever experience I had of it. And you'd like put in a prompt and you'd say, give me X, Y, and Z, whatever it is that you were searching for. And then it would give you like an iteration back. And then you'd be able to go back and say, okay, with the one in the top left, change it slightly so it looks like this. And then you'd kind of like play around with it to get a visual from it. Obviously, when it first came out, and it was kind of, there was that, and there was also DALL-E, I believe that's how it's pronounced. That was quite a similar tool, but had a lot more work to do in terms of like the output that it would give you. I felt like Midjourney from the get-go kind of gave you a bit more of like a sleeker finish, so to speak. And even now so has developed like even more with kind of like what you would get out of it versus then, which would have been maybe like 3-ish years ago, around my first kind of like experience with it.
I think there's kind of a stereotype where younger professionals in the performance marketing space, or just generally, are kind of more accepting of using AI, while older generations might be a bit more skeptical or hesitant. Do you find that to be true?
I definitely think that, you know, younger generations, quote unquote, so Gen Z, millennials, we've grown up in a digital age. So we are, I guess, maybe more comfortable with adapting, and like our industry, performance marketing, PR, like it changes all the time. Like it adapts so much. So you're a lot more used to it, I guess. But then equally, I'm also, I don't know if it's just me, but like I'm also somewhat skeptical of it as well. So I guess it kind of depends on what I'm using it for. So I would never use AI personally to come up with an idea that I would then give to a client. I might use it to give me a piece of insight or to fact check something. So more so from like okay, I would like to do this. Does that make sense? Or like, what would that maybe look like? And then you'd obviously get a response back, and then you develop it and you adapt it from there. So to come back to your question, yes and no. Like I see how that can be true, but I also see how it maybe can't be as well.
I mean, it's kind of almost like AI is your assistant, rather than taking over everything.
Yeah.
I don't think that doesn't really work if you let AI just come up with the idea, execute it, and give that to a client.
No, and I feel like it can't do like what a human brain can do, especially when it comes to like ideas and it comes to generating something that like, you know, that people are going to respond to, because you are just human. Like, you know, you're an emotional being. Like, you know how people are going to maybe perceive that. But then equally, it can also help you if you're maybe in like a little bit of a rut and you're like, oh, can you help steer me in like maybe the right direction? And then like, as humans, like we just kick in and we're like, okay, yeah, and this is how I'm going to elevate it, and this is how I'm going to take it to this channel or through this tactic or whatever that might look like.
One thing I wanted to touch on is in the performance space, I think it's kind of divided this idea of brand and performance and creative not really being as important and not really working together. And then there's some people now that say you can't actually have them be separate. You have to have these things work together, because that's how you create long-term sustainable strategies.
Yeah.
How do you kind of navigate that challenge of bringing the two together?
I feel like data or like feeds creativity, like ultimately. So especially like in my industry, like I am more creative because of the insights that I have. So for example, if I'm ideating or I'm developing a campaign or whatever that might be, like that will be born out of some data or some insight that helps to make that stronger. So it's allowing me to know that that's going to resonate with maybe the target audience that I'm going after, or it's going to allow me to know where they spend their time. So I kind of feel like if you want the best creative, that has to be informed by that insight. And also with your creative like output, like you're now able to, and you know, we have been for some time, able to like optimize it based on like what that data has told us. So if we know that people are responding to a certain type of creative that they've maybe seen on TikTok or they've seen on Instagram, that then tells us, okay, so we know that the people that spend time in these places respond to this type of content. That's a great thing. Like that's a great way for those two things to like work hand in hand.
Would you say there's such a thing as too much data? Or is it more just knowing how to organize your data and knowing how to read it?
I think I always say there's like no such thing as too much information, but I am someone that likes to have the full picture. So yeah, I think it's knowing how to orchestrate the data and maybe also like how to not let it hold you back as well. So not all generations are going to follow the same trends or the same patterns or the same like consumer behavior. You have to look broader than that. So, you know, you might do, I don't know, some research or like a piece of insight, and you're maybe looking at Gen Z, for example, or millennials. Not all Gen Z and not all millennials will agree and will make the same decisions. So I kind of feel like you need to know when to look past it and know when to let it like help you. And that's how you're going to get the best out of it, if that makes sense. I feel like I've gone around the houses to say what I was trying to say.
Well, I agree, and I also think it's also about looking at what generations can influence each other as well. It's not always about targeting one generation.
Absolutely.
Because, you know, Gen Alpha could be influencing their millennial or older parents. I don't actually know how old Gen Alpha is. And Gen Z could also be influencing their older friends. And it's all about kind of reaching all of them rather than just being hyper-focused on one.
Yeah, and also I feel like you see that a lot with like influencers, for example. So like there's a lot of influencers online that have like a grandparent-grandchild like dynamic, like a duo. There's one that springs to mind who they're called like Jess and Norma, and it's a girl who I'm not 100% sure how old she is, but I would guess Gen Z millennial, and her grandma. And their whole, like, I guess, strategy is around, like, what they have learned from each other. And so how, like, Jess, for example, like, is showing her grandma, like, you know, new ways to do things, or, like, you know, how things are developing. But then there's also things that she'll still do that ring true, that what she's learned from her grandma. So it's, yeah.
There's another account on TikTok and on Instagram where it's like this Italian grandmother.
Yeah. I think I've seen that.
I love her. Yeah. She's so funny. When you look at that idea of learning from one another, those two different generations, if we apply that in the performance marketing space, specifically looking at creative optimization, what are some things that you've learned from more senior professionals in your industry, and what are some things that you've taught them?
Oh, okay, that's a really good question. I feel like things I've learned and I guess like become way more comfortable with is just testing and learning, like constantly, and making sure that you're doing that in the best way that you possibly can. So, you know, whether it's from a PR, we test and learn all the time. So it might be that you're like A/B testing your headlines. It might be that you're using like sentiment analysis to make sure that whatever you're putting out is like resonating with your target audience. It might be that you're testing different formats. So you might be using an expert comment for one piece, or you also might be using a piece of creative for something else. So it's kind of like, I guess, getting comfortable with that and pushing yourself through, and like not giving up. Like it can be really like easy to, if maybe like you're testing something and it doesn't go in like the way that you want to, that like, I think like old me, like as in younger me, would see that as maybe like, I've not done this right, or this like hasn't worked. But now I feel like I'm way more like, okay, but what can I learn from that? Like, where can that take me? And how can I elevate what I'm doing to make sure that we take something from this and we do it better next time? I feel like that's like something that I've maybe learned from, learned from people like who are kind of senior to me. I am a big believer of there is often, if not always, more than one way of doing things. And that is something that I champion a lot at my workplace. So not to go off track too much, but I was late diagnosed with ADHD when I was 27, so a couple of years ago now. And since going on that like journey of kind of understanding myself better, I have like realised that actually, as I say, like there is usually always more than one way of doing things, and just because one way is the done way doesn't mean that that's necessarily the best way to do it, and that we can't iterate and we can't adapt and we can't change. And I guess kind of AI feeds into that narrative quite naturally, and finding ways, I guess, to be maybe more efficient or to question what we're doing. Like I like to challenge things quite a lot. So I feel like that's maybe something that people in the industry or in, you know, my company specifically have learned from me. So maybe like getting more comfortable with like challenging and putting things forward that like you've maybe come up with, or if you're, you know, looking at something, a process maybe, and you're like, I feel like we could maybe have done that a bit differently, or we could do it like this. Like kind of having the, I guess, encouragement to bring that to the table. It can be hard to do that when you're maybe more of a junior person in a team, and you've maybe not found your voice yet. So yeah, I guess in a roundabout way, I like to think I've maybe helped people to find their voice.
Amazing. Yeah. I mean, I think it's interesting when you look at that comparison between what you've learned and what you've taught them, where what you've learned was to be able to kind of take feedback from what you've done and just be able to improve rather than feel a bit gutted that something didn't go your way. But at the same time, what you're teaching them is to try new things and to challenge yourself. And I think that's where you can see that you need to have that balance between those older generations and younger generations in this space where you could both benefit each other and teach each other rather than just one listening to the other one. Yeah. And I think on the topic of like kind of investing in different channels and looking at different opportunities and challenging yourself, we spoke about looking at things like different search tools or different social media platforms. And when you look at social media platforms, one of the bigger trends at the moment is short form. Yeah. And I find this to be very common when I'm speaking to people in the industry that have been in the industry for 20 plus years. Yeah. They have stereotypes of Gen Z people that they're attached to, and one of them is that you have that short attention span because you love TikTok, so we can't post anything that's longer than 10 seconds. Do you think that's true, or do you think that's a bit of an exaggeration?
I can kind of see it from both sides. I think the main thing that comes back to it for me with short form content is more so like we have content fatigue. We are consuming so much content day in, day out, especially if you're in an industry like ours where kind of that's your job. So I consume content for my work purposes, but I also consume content for my personal enjoyment as well. So yes, I can understand the narrative that, you know, our attention spans are maybe shrinking. I don't know if that's factually correct or not. Like, I've got a short attention span, I've got ADHD, like, so it's a little bit different for me. But I think it's more so that short form content is a great way to catch people's attention. So you can do something super quick, super sharp, super snappy that is going to get somebody's attention. So it is important when you're there's so many brands out there now that are creating content and they're all competing with each other. So I see the role of short form and why it's so important. But for me, it's more so that it can help to like catch the attention of maybe like your audience or like a new target audience that you're going after. But then I also think like it needs to go hand in hand with long form content that helps to build your brand and have more maybe longer term engaged conversations. So I kind of feel like both are important and both like play their part.
It's one of those things where nothing will ever work just on its own.
No.
You can't only focus on short form.
You don't have a solo strategy. Yeah.
Exactly. Because it's like, yes, short form is a big thing. And yes, a lot of people only want to see short form content. But that's not to say that long form isn't working either. And if anything, I think long form is becoming a bit more popular because when you look at things like Twitch and live streaming and video podcasts and even mukbangs.
And vlogs.
And vlogs.
YouTube vlogs. Like...
And people love these things and people will stay tuned because they want to build that authentic connection with the brand. Yeah. And where you have long form, you build that authentic connection. So it's looking at those different channels. And
I think what it is for me with long form is I'm personally way more likely to engage with long form content when I already feel connected to the brand or to the podcast that's maybe putting that out, or like if it's an influencer that I like to watch their vlogs, like something that I'm already bought into, I'm way more likely to engage with that longer form content. I think on the flip side, short form content is more so if I'm kind of like scrolling and I want a dopamine hit. If I want to kind of get that like little
scrolling.
Yeah, I do that a lot. Guilty. But like if I, and also in PR and kind of what I do, short form content plays a really important role. So for example, one thing that we're seeing a lot at the moment with the media is using short form content of journalist expert comments. So it's like a really good way to get really insightful, really like quick, really snappy, but important information out to their readers in a new way. So it's not just that they're reading it online, they're getting to see an embedded video that helps, that they can also use on social and things like that. So it's that it does have its role and it is really important. But I think you hit the nail on the head when you said like no strategy is just going to have like one. It has to be an amalgamation of things that you're doing to hit your target audience at the right stage in their journey.
I thought it was interesting you mentioning vlogs as well coming back. One thing that I've been noticing is a lot of older channels that were kind of like relevant when you were 13 years old are coming back. So it's things like YouTube, like Snapchat, Facebook as well. Do you think their brands are going to start advertising and creating campaigns across these platforms a bit more?
If the data tells them that they should be doing, I guess.
So it all comes back to data.
Yeah, but like if you know that your audience is spending time on a certain platform, then you absolutely should be marketing to them on that platform. I guess it depends. I stopped using Snapchat years ago.
Same.
Like I've not used Snapchat for a very long time, so I don't actually know like what its kind of like current capabilities are. But I definitely still think like it will have its place for a certain type of audience. Similar to Facebook, that will have its place for a certain type of audience. Like, again, I'm a terrible performance marketer. I don't have Facebook either. But I feel like, yes, but only if it's right is probably the most diplomatic answer.
Let's just go back to AI, but as well as like the state of performance marketing currently, where it's becoming a bit more data-driven, a bit more automated, and more focused on the numbers, seeing the numbers right away, seeing the ROI right away as well. Where does that leave human creativity?
Human creativity is still like at the forefront for me. I feel like where you can automate things, so where you can get real-time insights or where you can report, like where you can use it, it boils down to efficiency, I guess. So where you can use AI and data like efficiently to give you the stuff that you need in that moment, then that frees up the time to be able to think about the things that you need to think about, like with your human brain. Like as I said before, like I don't feel as though like AI or a machine can give you like just the same level. Like let's take like ChatGPT for example. You might say to it, in my context, I'm really simplifying this, it's not actually necessarily what I would say, but give me some digital PR ideas that are going to be relatable to this target audience that read these types of publications. So say, for example, it will give me back a list of like 3, 4, 5, 6 things. That might give a little bit of a starting point, but that is never going to be, or right now, never going to be enough to compete. It's never going to be enough to like, when there's so many brands creating content that they're pushing out on digital PR, through digital PR as a channel, it's never gonna give you what a human brain can give you in that instance.
Fred, thank you for joining me.
Hey Reem, how you doing?
I'm good, how are you?
I'm not too bad, thanks. Not too bad.
Well, we're glad to have you in the studio. We had a bit of a mess trying to get this episode together, but I think it's fine now.
It's all on me. Don't worry. Nothing's on you.
Well, we're glad to have you here. Yeah. Okay, so Fred, we're talking about creative optimization today, and we've spoken to Meg about it a bit, but I wanted to see how you use AI in your day-to-day when it comes to creative optimization and kind of when you first started using AI.
I guess when it comes to AI, the first time it came around, I can't remember, was it the beginning of 2023? Potentially, it started to kind of creep into the kind of workflow and, well, the media and creative industry as a whole. And it was very much like a shock thing and everyone was like jumping on it straight away, right? And no one actually knew what it was or how to do it. And I guess maybe it didn't take until 2024 for that to start kind of creeping into the kind of workflow that I was like processing. I guess the main AI use case for me normally is like the synthesis of data and contextualizing that data very quickly, right? So it's almost more so pre-optimization and like in the production side of things, like how do we actually understand more about the people we're going after, right? And how do we know exactly what to communicate with them, what kind of creative styles or strategies are going to work? I guess what's interesting after that is like once that goes in, then the creative optimization stage comes around. It's all about AI being able to understand and analyze data a lot faster, right? I think for me, speed is the main thing that it allows. So it means that campaigns aren't so kind of static anymore. You got like a lot of iteration that can happen on the fly, and I think that's probably the kind of main use case for it, for me, so to speak.
It's kind of like a shift when you compare 2023 to 2024. It's a shift from people being scared of using AI and kind of feeling like, oh no, the robots will take over, and into actually using AI in your day to day and making your workflow a lot more efficient. The way that you use it now in your day to day, do you think you could go back to a time before you were able to use it, or is it now like you can't imagine not having that anymore?
I think I definitely could, but I'll be working a lot more hours. No, I don't know. Like it's almost like a paradigm shift, isn't it? This whole AI stuff, right? And it's often when you go through a paradigm shift, you forget how it was way back when. Like I guess we can't understand how it was to not use a mobile phone, right? And now it's just second nature. And I believe that in the next year, or like within 2025, it will start to become second nature to a lot of us to be able to use it. And it's not so much this kind of new shiny thing that people are scared of, but also people actually don't know how to use, right? I think that was the main issue back in like 2023. People were like, great, it's AI, but how do I actually apply it? I think now people are really understanding it. There's so many tools that are just baking AI into their UI and their interface and experience. And the same with creative agencies, the same with media agencies. AI is a big thing that everyone is betting on. And I'm sure that at the end of this year, people will be able to actually like understand exactly how to use it. And obviously us under 30 are the ones that are kind of more digitally native. So kind of feels like it's a relatively simple process of adoption.
Our generation, because I'm also Gen Z, if you couldn't tell, but our generation kind of grew up where adaptability is kind of expected, because we grew up in that digital age and things kept changing at a very fast pace, and you kind of just go along with it, and you're a bit more self-taught in that way, where even with AI, for me, it's been a lot of having to teach myself what works best for me in my work. And I think that's what makes us different from older generations. Did you find that you had to be a bit self-taught when it came to using AI?
Definitely self-taught. It's almost like it's interesting, isn't it? Because the way the applications work, a lot of the time they're quite conversational themselves. So it's almost like you have to iterate and refine to actually start to understand what works best for obviously a lot of the kind of chat functions are like that, but a lot of the other user interface AI functions are very similar. Like I feel like what's interesting this time around is that with the kind of the paradigm from obviously like desktop to laptop to mobile to AI, is that functionality and usability is almost built into the tool itself, right? The tool itself is there to make things easier, and you can almost feel that. And it's almost like I enjoyed like being self-taught on it because it was so easy and so like intuitive in understanding how to use it and apply it. So I think I'm definitely with you on that. Like it's almost quite fun to kind of figure out what works best for the platform, but also best for you as well.
When you say if you didn't have AI anymore, you'd be working a lot more hours. Since using AI and making your workflow a lot more efficient, where have you used your time in other places? Like where were you able to focus a bit more?
The main focus then comes from really pulling yourself out from the day to day and being able to be like very lateral and strategic, right? I think that's the main thing. Sometimes in the kind of performance era before AI, you're in the data a lot, right? And that's obviously a good thing because you're analyzing it and you're understanding what works, what doesn't work, right? But I think sometimes you can then fall victim to not actually pulling your head out of the sand and realizing, right, do we actually have the best strategy in place? Like, do we know what audience we're going after? Do we know what makes them tick? All of that kind of stuff. And I feel like AI has really helped me have more thinking time as opposed to like actually analysis, and I think that is super powerful and something that's going to really kind of elevate a lot of the kind of strategic thinking that comes out of a lot of us within the industry.
I think also with younger generations, we're a bit more up for trying new things and trying different channels and trying different types of creative and trying to reach different audiences as well. What kinds of channels are you looking at that maybe older people in the industry, more senior professionals, might not be looking at?
I guess the big one is TikTok, right? Like, it's interesting when you look at the actual penetration of the platform. Like, it is very like young skewed, but it's not to say that like older millennials and some younger Gen X are on there, right?
My dad uses TikTok.
And I was thinking the other day, I was like, it's now got to a point where I don't even talk to my parents in messages. My dad specifically, I talk to my dad in memes. And like Instagram reels, it's actually bizarre. Like, so it's like these guys are still on these platforms, right? So I think short form is probably what's most king at the moment. It's interesting when it comes to like how younger people and attention spans in general, but mostly like accentuated by younger people, are decreasing, right? Like, I don't know about you, but when I'm watching a series on TV, I'm also on my phone, second screening. Right?
I do that a lot.
It's insane how we just don't have the attention span anymore to sit through a half an hour episode. Like, we have to have our phones out. So anything short form is kind of like where a lot of the time we are looking. I think there's also an interesting resurgence around out of home as well, and how people are understanding how, especially with like digital out of home, how you can be very, very like tactical with it, and obviously then lends itself really nicely into the kind of performance world, as opposed to it being seen like traditionally as a very like branded media. It's now got that kind of strong tactical element to it with a digital nature, and I think that's super strong.
Can you explain that a bit more about how that ties into the performance world as well?
Yeah, so obviously because it's digital, right? Like, there's a lot more data that can go into it, right? The performance like arena is ultimately a data economy, right? The more data you give your performance campaigns, the better they're going to be, right? So the kind of capability of digital out of home and understanding how you can use like trigger based signaling to do that, or even like really, really strong geo targeting tactics, that's kind of how you can then build a really, really strong tactical natured campaign around it, that maybe perhaps the kind of traditional printed out of home possibly couldn't do back in the day.
With short form, because I know you said that it is becoming, it is currently a big thing, and I agree. I mean, I also am very much the type of person who would scroll on my phone while watching something, but I think it also depends on which platform it's on, because we were talking earlier about long form content also becoming more of a trend currently, and resonating with younger audiences too.
The long form thing's interesting, right? Because that's just more of a, I think the reason that's coming back is, like you say, the authenticity is there, and it's initially being driven a lot by creators and influencers as opposed to brands. And I think brands are catching on to the fact that long form these days doesn't have to be pristine and glossy. You know, these days it's almost like it has to be more raw and unfiltered, and that's what people like. And I think that kind of authenticity is also making people a lot more leaned in to that long form content, right? Like, they're actually super interested in what is going on within the content itself. It's not so much of like long form now is almost about how you can build like trust and have that authenticity with your target consumer, whereas the short form video nature is almost the other side of that, right? Short form is like, how can I grab attention, and how can I like really kind of like cut through and make our brand and our kind of products feel more differentiated and distinctive, which maybe is like the kind of nuance between that kind of long form and short form.
And also with long form, it's kind of like if brands want to invest in that, they also need to invest a lot of their time into it too, because it's a commitment. Because if you're sponsoring a podcast, for example, but you're doing proper branding on the podcast and you're the only sponsor and you're going to be that partner for the whole season, that's a lot of budget that you're going to be putting into that, and that's a lot of commitment, but it can pay off greatly, and it can build that connection with your audiences. But when you're on a tighter budget, especially, people keep cost cutting more and more, where do you invest that budget in a smart way if you can't commit to the long term?
That's where the kind of AI stuff comes back into the conversation, right? Because AI can, whilst there's a cost to some of the AI that you need to kind of go into like creative and content production, it definitely helps in the short form more, right? Because you can spit out and churn out more variation, right? And more asset, and you can do testing a lot easier with a short form creative. Whereas the long form, you can't really imagine using AI to completely build a half an hour podcast, right? Or a half an hour piece of like video content, right? And I think that's probably where the investment would go in trying to figure out, like, if we can't commit all the budget into that long form stuff, like we have to try and make efficiencies with the short form, right? And AI can help you do that. Then try and unlock some funds to help you put away into the long form. But then it's interesting in the long form, like if it's you coming from the branded perspective, like if you don't have all of the budget to go and kind of produce and develop your own content, how can you tap into someone like a content creator or an influencer to help you bridge that gap in investment that you might be struggling with?
And do you think it's about thinking about all these different strategies at the same time, where you're reaching all of these different audiences rather than investing in what's trending now?
100%, yeah. I feel like if you run down the angle of let's just keep going on what's trended, your trends always come about organically, right? And you have to be super agile and quick to hop onto a trend. You're not the one that's going to be creating that trend, so to speak. That's advertising won't kind of work in that way. So yeah, I think it's definitely important to kind of make sure that you're spanning what you do, right? And making sure that you can kind of distribute across all the different content formats, and they all have different jobs. Like we just spoke about, right? Like the short form can be about attention grabbing. If you're putting everything into that, yes, you're grabbing attention, but do you have the kind of long form assets and content there to actually help nurture someone's perception of your brand? That maybe the short form video it can do, but it can't do to the extent that something like long form would.
I also wanted to talk about the kind of perspectives that you have in the performance marketing space currently that might be a bit different from people who have been in the performance space for a longer period of time. I mean, performance is all about numbers, right? It's all about data. It's about being able to show that the campaign that you've just done has actually proved results, and it's given you revenue, and it was worth your time and your investment. And there's a conversation now of, does brand fit with performance, and can those two things go together? And I think with younger professionals, they kind of see it as something that goes hand in hand rather than being completely separate. Yeah. Would you agree with that?
I think so. And I think it's just a blend, right? Like they are just fully blending at the moment. I think it's almost counterintuitive to try and delineate them too much. The main reason being that if you try and delineate them too much, where's the creative consistency coming from? Where's the kind of communication consistency coming from? It starts to become very difficult to kind of get those two together. But I also think the reason that the younger generation feels like that probably more so is because we've started our careers with all of the seminal work in terms of brand and performance being there and ready for us to read. All the material, like Benet and Field, all of that kind of stuff is just there for us straight away. And we kind of adopted it as soon as we come in through the ranks. So I think that's why perhaps as the kind of younger generation, we feel more, in tune with it, and we feel like we're really committed to making sure that they work really, really well together. I also just think with the kind of, even we're talking about how there's kind of like short form video is now this big thing, right? You wouldn't have considered video to be very performance driven as a
even audio,
or even audio, right? So even 5 years ago you wouldn't have thought that, but 5 years ago performance was static ads and paid search, and Google Shopping, right? Now it's kind of blending into YouTube, this short form video stuff, audio. So it's really interesting about how the kind of media consumption that happens nowadays compared to the past is almost like blending brand and performance together. I think that's super interesting.
When you add AI into the mix as well, then AI can help you measure these channels that aren't traditionally performance. Because I mean, even with audio, I think there's some AI tools now that can actually measure what your audience is.
Yeah.
When you think of when you're investing into audio, and it's the same across all. So it's all of these different channels are going to end up being performance anyway.
Exactly.
So it's just kind of trying to be ahead of the game.
Yeah, ultimately, what you're trying to do at the end of the day is deliver business outcomes for your brand, right? And so every single piece of advertising or content that you put out there is trying to do that, right? And it depends, whether there's certain metric that you're trying to shift is further up the funnel compared to being further down the funnel. At the end of the day, you're still trying to fuel performance, and I think that is kind of what a lot of people are starting to realize nowadays.
I've done an interview before with Rory Sutherland, and he doesn't like performance marketers very much. But I think what he said was, all marketing is performance marketing when you actually think about it.
Exactly. Yeah.
What are some outdated practices in performance marketing, and what are some things that continue to stay the same and continue to work even years and years later?
So the biggest outdated thing in performance marketing is last click attribution, right? I don't know why that stuff is still around. It's such a frustrating way to try and evaluate the success of a lot of your marketing activity, right? We're just speaking about how there's different ways of reaching your audience via different formats and types of media, right? And hardly any of these newer mediums actually lend themselves to last click, right? You're not really going to go from watching an Instagram reel to suddenly buying something online. It's that's the biggest thing that needs to shift, and people need to really start understanding how else they can evaluate the success of their performance marketing. So thinking about how you can understand what other metrics you need to be shifting that aren't just an online sale, right? Like what else within the kind of consumer journey can you actually start to measure and understand if that's if you're pulling on the right levers, right? Understand if you're doing that properly, and also thinking about how you can actually start to leverage like cookieless attribution tools and like media mix modeling, right? Yeah. That's ultimately how you're going to start to get towards a better, fairer way of evaluating the success. There's no silver bullet for anything, right? If there was, then there'd be no point in any of these tools existing, right? The idea is that you need to really understand how you can't really have a source of truth. You need to have lots of sources of almost truths, right? And you can basically then understand how you can paint a better picture of what's working well.
And what about the things that just don't change?
I guess the things that don't change for me is that like you still need to have the best relationship with your clients and with the people that you're working with, media owners, with those kind of people, right? That human element of performance marketing is never ever going to go. AI is not going to come in and start like going into meetings and taking meetings instead of you. You might take notes in a meeting, but it's not going to be the one leading a meeting or being able to develop a strong relationship with a brand, with an agency, with a different partner like that. And I think that is the main thing for me. Like, really, I'm personally quite enjoying the whole like return to office culture. I'm mostly in the office at least 4 days a week. I just love the human element of being there, and find the light bulb moments only really happen when you're in real life and with people. I think they're definitely the biggest thing that's always going to stay, and I'm here for it.
So it's all about the human touch, like collaboration. And then the last question is, what is one trend that you think is going to change the game in creative optimization and performance marketing in the next 5 years?
So I think one thing that's probably going to change the game is how AI can, again, maybe start to actually spit out insights for you in a way that, because right now it's just expediting, right? And it feels like it's very much like a fast way of analyzing data. It's going to get to the point in the future where it's starting to tell you the insights, right? Whether that is like I don't know, spitting out actual like automated messages that you can really quickly understand. I think the biggest thing is going to be data analysis and understanding like how that can then be used faster and in a more human way to optimize and help strategize in the future in performance marketing.
Fred, Meg, we're going to play a little game. We're going to play myth or fact, but specifically about creative optimization.
Okay.
So, more ads equals better performance.
Myth.
Why do you think it's a myth?
I don't know. Just we're in a data economy, and having more data doesn't mean that it's going to be like stronger, right? Like more data, the more there is to analyze as well, right? It's all about understanding the data that actually matters the most, right? I think that's the main thing.
Putting more out doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get more from it.
Well,
Yeah.
you're both right.
Yeah.
A meta study found that campaigns with 3 to 5 ad creatives per ad set have better performance and lower costs than those with 10 plus variations. Short form content is king, so long form is dead.
Myth.
Yeah.
That is a myth. We were just talking about how long form is coming back and how you kind of need to focus on both of them rather than just focusing on the short form content. But YouTube found that longer videos that are 8+ minutes generate higher retention and ad revenue than shorter ones. You can boost ROI by 3 times just by changing one word in your ad copy.
I'm going to say,
Fact.
yeah, true.
Why do you think that's true?
I think it depends on like you think about the ad copy, right? It could be like if it's like a 3-word sentence and you change one of those words, that's going to be amazing, right? If it's like a whole like long form piece of text, then maybe not. But like words are quite powerful, right? And that's the main thing.
Yeah. I feel like the difference a word can have, even in just like a small sentence, can completely change how someone's going to perceive it. So yeah, I would say true.
That is true. You're both correct. You both know how to do your jobs.
Result.
AI can fully optimize creative without human input.
Fact.
Yeah, I would say true.
That is a myth.
Oh,
Did you say it can't or it can?
Can.
It can.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, then that without human input.
AI can fully optimize creative without human input.
oh, see, I would have thought that was true, but I was going to say that makes me sad.
It's a myth. So, according to Google research, AI-powered creative optimization can boost ad engagement by up to 30%. But I still think this is one of those, yes, AI could do it, but also having that human touch and having that creative is still always going to generate better results.
100%.
Yeah.
That's not to say that AI in itself can't generate results. I just don't think it's very sustainable.
Yeah.
Sounds like classic like grey area.
I
territory,
felt like that was a trick question, so I was trying to game the system a little bit there and it backfired.
Double negatives.
Got one more. Video ads can be skipped in less than 2 seconds, but still drive a conversion.
Ooh.
In less than 2 seconds.
Yes.
I'm going to go fact on that one.
I'm going to say myth.
Why do you say it's myth? Why do you say it's fact?
2 seconds. I just I don't know. I feel like I'm second guessing myself, but I struggle to think that somebody could skip something in less than 2 seconds and still convert. Like that's a really, really, really small window of time. But I could be wrong.
It is, but I don't know. I think like it depends on like who the advertiser is as well, right?
Yeah.
Like
and if you're already bought into them, I guess.
Yeah, and how strong the creative is. Like
Yeah.
it could be like super powerful in the first 2 seconds. Like
Yeah.
who knows? And I was just trying to count in my head there 2 seconds, and it actually is longer than you probably think it is.
So that is a fact, and I think that's more to do with so I'll tell you the stat as well. So 59% of video ads are skipped within the first 2 seconds, but they still drive conversions and brand recall. But I also think that depends on which kind of brands already have that connections with audiences as well. Because sometimes it could literally just be a brand that you already follow, have been buying from for years, and it's just a new product launch, and then it's like, I don't need to see the ad, but I can still purchase this thing. So again, grey area, depends on the situation. Well, that was all. You got all of them right, I think. But thank you guys for joining me.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you for listening to Digital Disruptors. New episodes of the mini-series will continue to come out fortnightly alongside the main show, Performance Marketing Unlocked. So make sure to stay tuned, and I'll see you next time. This episode was produced by Nav Pal, Studio Manager at Haymarket.